issue of trust, which is very important here and can be used in different ways. So my first question would be for all the panelists, how do you believe, or whether do you believe in which way the explainable AI can help in gaining trust to the models that we are using for so many years in the field of artificial intelligence? Can we maybe go from start with you, Islam?
Okay. And I will give my totally biased clinician perspective here. And for those that heard me talking this morning, probably I will not add much to that, but I think first we need to work in education, and not just education of the clinicians. And I'm not talking just about physicians, I'm talking about physical therapists, I'm talking about nurses, everyone that touch the patient 24/7. And that education is not about the use of AI and all those points that Carlo mentioned about the experimentality of the model, but also the educators and how that information is transmitted. I think we as investigators that develop AI systems or models, and I think we commit a little bit of mistake as well, in the sense that we overuse certain words. I'm particularly, I don't like the word AI. I think it's too broad, gives too much misunderstanding. And I think there are some misconceptions generated by media and mistakes that very few models did that stick on people's mind. So I think the way that we transmit this information as well is important. I don't use black box, for example, to define what I do. I think there are things that I cannot explain. And I do my best to understand the model, the way that I build. And I think people associate things and then they generalize everything inside the same pocket of condition. So I think we have a lot to do as we build these models, as builders as well, the way that we transmit this information, the way that we publish this work, in the way that we interact with the clinicians in all these steps to make them understand all the process on the way and how they will then be, they will have the knowledge to actually transmit that trust to patients, because that is the end goal. And then patients have the freedom to actually have a decision to make based on knowledge. I think that is one of the things that I try to do every day when I work, in my work, in my own research.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's important to look at the entire model development and deployment process. And so physicians, I think it's important that they understand how the model was built. That's part of developing trust. Also understand the, if there was evaluation, and typically we do evaluation, so how was the evaluation process carried out? What were the results of that evaluation process? And did we evaluate those things that are important in clinical outcomes? So for example, variability with respect to different demographic groups, right? Did we address that when we evaluated the model? And then down to deployment. So you said it at inference time, which is often what people talk about when they talk about explainability. So, you know, when the model is making a particular recommendation, that we can then explain why is it making that recommendation. And then I guess, you know, there are two audiences for this explainability. One is the physicians, or also the nurses or other healthcare practitioners that are making use of the system. And the other would be patients, right? So we also want to be able to explain to patients what is coming out of these models and why are they making the recommendations. And obviously the kind of vocabulary you use and the kind of language you use is going to be very, very different for those two audiences.
Well, first of all, thank you and apologize for my delay. And well, this is nice because I've been working, I'm a computer scientist. I've been working in a medical school since 20 years. And in 20 years, I can testify that something is changed even in the way clinical operators, I would say, and the actors, they manage data, first of all. And of course, they have to focus on patients. So artificial intelligence has to be considered as an instrument that is absolutely necessary to, if you want to navigate through tons of data. I mean, think for instance to new devices that generate images. If you consider the magnetic resonance or even a tomography that is able to generate really a quantity of always much more precise, or banally think to your mobile, 12 megapixel of images, the quantity of information that you generate. So first position is that it's hard to avoid, I mean, maybe AI is not the nice terms to generalize, but we need something that, you know, supports in navigating through tons of data to minimize always the mistakes from physician side. And the other thing is that consider that the technical part is always one step behind the physician that has always to take some decisions that has to do with human effects and characteristics. The explainable is the interesting part currently, because we need as technicians improve trustness with respect to technical aspects. So improving and try to give information, things for technicians, the deep learning techniques that we use to give information about what is inside the black box and why some results and some decision is much more better to take with respect to some others. So I think that this is a very, very hot and important topic that has to be considered, whatever the role you will have in a health informatics scenario.
So let me add some comment to the other perspective. Usually with explainability, I start from data because it is the first step. With physician, it happens many times that we discuss with them some new techniques. We try to explain the technique, and my colleagues working with me, they insist, they do question till they understand the approach, at least the overall idea. But then they ask, please show me the data that confirm your conclusion. And that is really important because it means that they want to be confirmed in their knowledge, because when they see the data, they have the confirmation that some approach is fine or not. And the trust is really important because when they are confirming their knowledge, if the system is providing something new, they start to discuss and to understand whether this new part is really interesting to them. If there is no trust and the system provides some new result, the new result is not useful at all because they are not able to understand why there is the result. If they already know that the system is working in the way they already know and they have some confirmation more detailed, more precise than usual, but is a confirmation of what they already know, then they are able also to accept and to understand something new. So trust is basic.
Thank you for your opinion. Maybe we do another round on a different topic, but still connected, like Lucian already mentioned just at the beginning of this first topic that we discussed. Education is very related also to trust. So because sometimes the expectations are high and sometimes we should be able to also educate, to inform our target group using all the systems, what can be expected, and this also is related to trust. So maybe do you have, maybe you can share some experience maybe from your teaching, or maybe just your view how important education is here in this context of explainable AI.
Me again? I totally agree.
We can go the other direction.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
now I
Maybe it's more fair.
next time then. So now I can start. Now we can start.
Okay.
And I totally agree with you that working closely with the clinicians since they start and discussing all the process make all the difference in the end. How they receive the information doesn't matter what will be the result. And I think that is part of the education as well, because while you are discussing, while you are seeing the data, what is good, what is bad, what is the weight of this or that, but why this feature is here, what this feature didn't make the model, is part of the education. And I think that education is every day when you are working, but it's also about how we are training the new generation. I have worked a lot in defining new competencies for nurses and how to train in data science, technology, understanding AI, and so on. And we struggle on how to educate educators because it's everywhere. It's not more the informatics department that you have one course related to information technology. Information is everywhere. Every clinician, every educator that are teaching anesthesia, pharmacology is everywhere. How we will start not just teaching the new generation, but the middle or old generation or senior generation, how technology is actually embedded everywhere. And I think there are a couple of things that we can do every day. Coming here and talking about this or writing about that, developing models that people can understand better, use easier words that can be better understood by the general public, but also try to make policy changes in a way that curriculum development can actually accomplish and include those words in the development of that. So I think there are a couple of venues that we can go in that direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of education, I guess, I think it's important when we work with physicians to make them aware of the limitations of the technologies we're working with, right? Because otherwise, of course, at some point, they're going to run into the limitations. And if we haven't informed them, then there's going to be, you know, a sort of disappointment and mistrust developing that says, well, look, you sold me this, you know, told me this is going to work so well in diagnosing this particular disease, and now we're having these problems, right? So I think educating people in terms of limitations also so that they know what to expect of the systems and how to use them most effectively is quite important.
Well, I think that the education is changing and is developing in a rapid way, and also the way the approach from of teaching is really changing, and probably pandemic accelerated a lot these and other aspects. I give you a couple of examples I enjoy because I really like to teach both to technicians in computer science and biomedical engineer and to nursery students. And this is nice because if you teach to a computer scientist or to biomedical engineer, you give them information about techniques. So you support them in, you know, in support. Support is correct because they go on internet and they, you know, find whatever they want about technique and about artificial intelligence and about classes that can be downloaded much more better than the ones that I provide them. But I support them in guiding. But if I discuss with nursery students, they don't really care about how a technique is defined or is designed or why you know, the Turing machine or Turing model is interesting for them. And at the same time, you have something that is changing. So it's much more, no more education in terms of I give information, you receive information. It's something that is changing in terms of let's change. I mean, if you make experiences, if you have third year nursing then you already works inside of an health structure. So the feedback is, this is the idea of data management. Do you think it's correct? And this is something that is strictly, again, related to explainability, not only in terms of techniques. So this is why this is a very hot topic, I guess, because it's something that, you know, it's not in one direction. I give you the techniques and I want also to give you information about why this is good. But I ask about validation. That is another interesting keyword. And who is going to approach to this new world? I think that is has to be aware about.
Thank you.
So thanks. So I see that education is really important, and as I said before, explainability refers to the way people is able to understand some topics. So getting educated means that you can provide more deep concept, deep explanation, detailed motivation, and so on. But mainly, education is important to avoid two different behaviors that I see quite often in currently. The first one is that when you see not only medicine, someone saying, I'm using AI-based tools, and it's like to say I'm using some magic tools. And according to this magic, the reaction could be in two different completely direction. The first one is I trust by default. I'm not using any criticism. If the system is saying something, that's the truth. And the other that is opposed, but is again not correct, is that as it is something related to magic, I don't consider the conclusion. I will not trust in this kind of conclusion because there are something strange, not really understood. You don't know what is the final goal of this kind of tools.
The real
final goal, the hidden final goal. So, and this kind of reaction are not allowed even for physicians and in the healthcare domain, where there are sophisticated technologies familiar with the physicians are familiar with, they are using during the daily activities in a simple, I would say, simple way for them. And we have to reach more or less the same situation for AI-based tools.
Thank you. So what I would suggest now is to touch one more recent topic, and then we can open the discussion. Also, ask some questions to our panelists. Maybe we go in another direction now, because Carlo is the appropriate person who will be able to tell you more about the topic I would like to open now, which is COVID. So Carlo will be able to tell you about the number of papers submitted to the journals on this topic. But my question is more in other direction. So how this can be related, or how what was changed maybe in the field of AI and of course of XAI, if you have any view or opinion on this.
With respect to COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, so as for COVID, I would start from the education because it is really related. In the use of this kind of AI-based techniques for COVID, I see, from my point of view as editor-in-chief for AI medicine, I receive a lot of papers dealing with COVID. The strange thing is that I received the first paper dealing with AI-based diagnosis of COVID 2 days after the first lockdown. So it's a little bit too fast also for AI-based techniques, but that's the way some people approach this kind of topic. And this first paper were mainly using this black box approach I described before. They take some techniques, don't know really how it works, but they try to obtain some result. And then they write this result as for some fate related reasons, the results are true. No criticism, no deep analysis, nothing. And that's really a pity, because AI-based techniques could help physicians and also healthcare providers in general, or healthcare policy people, to obtain the right decision, but after some critical approach to the conclusion of these tools, and after a lot of processing of data before reaching this conclusion. So it is not possible in 2 days to obtain some really sound result. But that's the way people are using AI in this period. That's not correct.
Thank you. Yeah, Angelo.
Well, we may talk so long for COVID, but I would like to put on the table a couple of things. First of all, yeah, as all the researcher, we started from the beginning in February, I guess, and I think that the reason, because we started to put the hands on information or data related to what then became a pandemia, was that we were scared. We were interested as researchers, but at the same time we were scared. And the other things that I think is that I love to consider that COVID highlighted all the things. It's something like, you know, when you see it, when you are on the sea and you see that everything is transparencies, but if you remove the water, then you will see that there is, you know, something that is not very nice in the deep part of the sea. And I think that COVID really highlighted all the problems in any scenario, in any environment. And one of these is exactly also the research, because in research there are many people that, you know, try to generate you know, possible results or possible application just because you know, this topic is going fast. So artificial intelligence, then after 2 years, artificial intelligence applied on COVID. Yeah, of course, it is very good, and we saw on highlighted on images. But the point is that there is something that it doesn't work in terms of, you know, in any scenario. And so if you have some problems, for instance, in some health structure, then it's highlighted by COVID. If you have some problems in a room where you cannot put 200 students while you are teaching, then it's highlighted. No more people that can stay in that room. Something like, you know, try to reset everything. Okay, it's not nice to see as technicians in this way. And this is the same at educational level, and this is the same at researcher. I guess you are all PhD students, and I remember that when I started my PhD in Paris, I had colleagues of mine that started the PhD in Italy, and you know, after 1 year and a half, I had no paper. Okay, and my colleagues in Italy, they had a lot of papers. So I compared and I said, why do you have papers and I don't have paper? I mean, I'm in another places. I left Italy and I was alone. It's tough. Huh? PhD period is really hard. Okay, it's one of the worst period of your life. So I know. I know exactly. Okay. But I'm joking, of course. But the point is like that, you know, it's what is the best part is having a paper after 2 years, and then you say, hey, this is my papers because I study and I worked on it and I'm able to go in deep at some point, or it's much more better having a paper accepted at artificial intelligence in medicines after 2 weeks of COVID and say, there is my name with this paper, you know. This is what we have tried to decide, but this is up to you, of course.
Anyway, the papers are best rejected.
Oh, I have no doubt about the way you are managing as editor. I've never submitted a paper on the artificial intelligence because I know him very well. So I don't want to, if I don't have any, wow paper, I will never submit it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that happened during COVID is that we saw sort of data and analyses of data being provided to citizens at an unprecedented level and being consumed at an unprecedented level. I mean, everybody I know is checking the COVID infection rates every day or multiple times a day, right? And people are getting very different, and so. Of course, lots of data and different kinds of data, right? So infection rates, recovery rates, hospitalization rates, death rates, right? And so then there's so much information coming to people and they may not be able to interpret it properly, right? So what does that mean about their risk, right? The positive test rate, is that accurate, right? Actually, in many places, no, it wasn't because there wasn't enough testing done, right? So, so I think there was a lot of information being provided, but in some ways misinformation, not intentional, but misinformation in the sense that people were not interpreting it accurately. And in that sense, that if it does become misinformation, there's a disconnect. So I guess it's interesting to look at how XAI can help there, right? When you've got all of this information being provided, results of analyses, and also from different sources, and the sources don't always agree, right? So what happens is that can lead to enormous confusion. And in the worst case, then people stop to trust the information sources, right? Which is also sort of, you get this, with COVID, we had this tremendous distrust. Oh, it's all a conspiracy, right? Because it seems so confusing. Okay, it's a conspiracy, it's not real. Right, and that becomes quite dangerous. So, I don't know, but yeah. So the suggestion is perhaps XAI can have some answers there.
I remember when COVID hit and people were saying, "Are you doing research in COVID?" I said, "No." I said, "No. What will happen with the other patients, with the other disease? COVID will go over. It will be over sometime." But anyway, I think I would like to emphasize, or at least for me was clear during COVID that we have, or at least I knew that, but I think people realize that we have a major problem with data that we actually thought that we have. And the COVID the multi types of results of COVID is just the reflection of how bad is the data used for COVID. And I think that is a clear representation of the data is totally bad. And anyway, and I think you cannot ever get a good model and good results with the type of data that you are using for predicting. And when Carlo mentioned that paper that showed up 2 days after, I just thought how they got the data and prepared the data for the analysis before, because like he's a lot of work. And I think I want to bring another question or another thing that did happen with COVID related to that will have an impact in how we have data available or not is in US for years and years and years, policymakers fought to implement telehealth, charge and bill telehealth, and how technology could be used to deliver care. And never we were able to get anything because policies, private patient privacy, patient confidentiality, and so on. In 1 week with COVID, everything was possible. Everything was possible. People were giving data for everything, anything. They even didn't ask. So why can we don't use, or why can we not make a smart decision, a conscious decision about sharing our data to develop good models as well, in the sense that it's not all biased because we don't have a good data that represent all our patients and the entire population. So I think COVID brings us more questions related to data that we even didn't think before. but like how we don't have a good representation of our patients, of our population, that we can use to actually build trustful and good AI systems that you can actually have good results when implemented and apply it to real world patients.
Thank you. Before we conclude the panel and also the workshop today, I would like to give you the opportunity to maybe ask a question, hear a view of our panelists to some of the topics that you find interesting, or maybe
Yeah, I want to thank the panel for a wonderful talk and sharing your insights on the XAI. I just want, for me, I think interpretability is kind of like subjective term. I'm just wondering if there any way to quantify interpretability and evaluate the system with interpretation, especially when we try to compare two systems that claim to be interpretable.
Yeah, so that's a very good question in the sense that with respect to this concept, till now we tried to give the idea of the meaning of the concept. But as for having some kind of measure related to this concept, some metrics for evaluating the level of interpretability and so on, that's a further step. Not really clear, and as far as I know, I don't know a final conclusion in the sense that also the approaches from the human-computer interaction, they have to assume that there is some common knowledge between the user, among the users. But what is this common knowledge? How to select the right user for understanding the level of interpretability is not simple. So that it is a good direction to consider.
Yeah, reliability and metrics are very good reference in this scenario, and I agree with Carlo. It's a very good direction. The 1 cent that I can add is that depend on the context. And for instance, if you consider the reliability of the results in a scenario where, for instance, techniques are used to support the decision while analyzing the medical images, for instance. And then in these cases, you know, the standard reference to define which is the protocol with respect to, you know, a particular lesion or a particular cases in, for instance, in lung cancer, then this may be a reference. But about the, you know, the reliability in terms of explainability, again, maybe it's the experts should support. So it depends on the scenario. Well, this is for my little experiences. We are performing, just to give you an example, we are performing a tentative of minimizing the contrast medium in magnetic resonance. So we need to have a threshold to see why this quantity is enough to say that the image is reliable in terms of diagnosis. But of course, it depends on the context. So the general purpose reference is probably a very hot topic on which we may invest.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question because you know, if we want to be able to evaluate whether we've succeeded or not, or how well we've succeeded, or if we even want to move the field forward, we have to have some kind of evaluation metrics and techniques. Problem with coming up with objective metrics is, as you've observed, explanation is a very subjective thing, right? I may like an explanation, you may not like that explanation. And of course, it depends also on our, you know, our background knowledge, right? An explanation may be understandable to one person and not so understandable to another. So, you know, I think one has to do this with empirical techniques. So let me talk about some work we have done. So I do a lot of work on intelligent tutoring systems in medicine, and so we did some work on a system to teach surgical decision-making. And so that's, it's education, but education is also explanation, right? And so the system could provide students with explanations. And so what we did was then, once we had the automated system, we came up with 20 scenarios where the system would provide a particular explanation. And we gave this to instructors, surgical instructors. We said, what would you say in this situation? And then we took all of these and randomized them and anonymized them. And then we provided this to expert instructors, so people who have 10 years of experience who manage the instruction, and asked them to rate these explanations. And that, in that way, we could see, you know, were the automatically generated explanations, were they as good as the human explanations? And sometimes they were better, and then we could also go back and ask the people who did the rating, why do you think this was better? And okay, so that gives you a perspective from an expert, but not necessarily not from the person who's receiving the explanation, right? So the other thing we did was then we also, using the same system, we did pre-post testing. So we did pre-testing of students, ran them through this, getting the explanations, and then did post-testing to look at how much did they learn using just the standard exams used for surgical decision-making in this particular domain. And so then we could also look at the level of the people who are receiving this. And I would think you could do something similar with explanations coming out of, say, a diagnostic system, not for teaching, but for diagnostic purposes.
Thank you.
I've been thinking here about your question. I think we don't know yet what would be the best way to do that. I think we will find out a lot about how to explain and what they want to be explained. I talk a lot about these explanations, and my collaborator last week, and he said, you know, at some point you have a couple of options of AIs, and then it's up to me to evaluate which one I want to use. So I think they oversee that happening as pneumonia, how do you treat? And then you can have this antibiotic, that one, and then you can pick the one based on some conditions, and maybe that would be the ingredients of that AI that it can measure and evaluate which one will be feeding better the patient. But I don't know. Of course, objective is always better, but there is a lot of subjective decision making in medicine, I guess. So at this point, I just say, let's see what will happen.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, we will now conclude with this workshop and also with the panel. At this moment, I would first like to thank all the panelists. So I think they deserve an applause. I would also like to thank all the authors of the papers presented today, also to the center for giving the keynote, and of course, enjoy the rest of the conference. And of course,